Hey everyone, welcome to Maxable's ADU webinar. We're really excited to share a ton of information with you guys today. We haven't done a webinar in a long while. Jared, how long has it been since we did a Maxable webinar?
It's been a couple of months.
It's been a few months. So welcome back everyone. I hope your year is off to a better start than last year, that's for sure. And then we're going to get started soon. We have a few minutes before we hit 11. But if you guys want to put in the chat where you are watching from, we'd love to see where people are calling in from. And then if we have specific information on the city that you're calling in from, we'll make sure to share some info with you guys on that. So again, kind of welcome. Looks like someone's from Los Angeles. So that's a really good fit because obviously LA had some massive news a couple of weeks ago. So we'll definitely be talking about that. So you're in good. See Lynette. Hey, Lynette. Someone's in Long Beach. Okay, cool. Welcome, Jeffrey. Nice to have you. Awesome. And then, yeah, at 11 o'clock, we'll get ready. So this is going to be a pretty jam-packed webinar. We have a lot to talk about around pre-approved plans, but we'll also make sure we open up some Q&A at the end too for just kind of general ADU questions. So if you're in a city that's not offering pre-approved plans yet, there should still be some really good info for you guys. Hi to Tiffany in San Diego. Oh, look at that. Someone logging in from Mexico. I don't know if we've ever had an international visitor before, so that's fun. Welcome, Carlos. Fantastic. And for those who are just joining us, we're going to get started exactly at 11. So, but in the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from, we'll be happy to, share some specific information about your city if we have it. Someone in Escondido, Glendora. Okay, awesome. Some Southern California people. And then we'll get to, at the end of the webinar, we'll open it up for Q&A, and the Q&A does not have to be specific to pre-approved plans. We're going to cover a lot of that information in the webinar, but we'll open up to general questions at the end too. So if you have just, things you want to get answered about ADUs, we're happy to help. Piedmont and Redwood City. Okay, some Bay Area people. Santa Clara County. Yep, definitely. Unincorporated Santa Clara County is one of the jurisdictions that really benefited from the 2020 regulations because their setback requirements were extremely unreasonable. So, oh, Pasadena. Okay, great. My husband went to school there. And Orange County, Coronado. Oh, awesome. Someone came to one of our open houses in La Mesa. Anaheim. Great. Awesome. We've got a ton of people joining. Yeah, feel free to introduce your guys' self and where you're coming in from in the chat. And it is 11, so we're going to get started. I think most of you probably know us at this point. My name is Caitlin. I'm the co-founder at Maxable. Jared is my other co-founder. He joined the team early last year, but we've been working together for a very long time. And Jared was really influential in advocating and getting a lot of the ADU legislation passed at the state level, but he's also been involved in a lot of advocacy at the local levels as well. And not only has Jared permitted more than 100 ADUs, although I've been saying that for a while, Jared, so I know the number is much higher now.
Yeah, we're getting close to 200 at this point.
Close to 200 ADUs. So you guys are in good hands today. We're going to get you a lot of really good information. And make sure you guys feel confident in being able to tackle these projects because that's really what we're all about here. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump into the presentation. And then again, we're going to do Q&A at the end. So if you guys have questions at the end, happy to answer any of your ADU questions. Doesn't have to be about pre-approved plans, okay? Okay. So obviously there was some really big news around pre-approved plans that came out of Los Angeles a couple weeks ago. They're, I don't know, maybe the 6th or 7th city now that's announced pre-approved plans. So we've seen plans in Encinitas, in San Diego County, in San Jose, in Los Angeles, in Santa Cruz. And so I think this is a trend that you guys are going to see more and more in your cities. And there are some really positive things coming out of some of these programs. So we want to make sure we highlight the really good things. But there's also some, I think, really big misconceptions that homeowners don't understand about these. And so I really want to make sure that you guys have all of the information that you need to make informed decisions and plan your projects accordingly. So before we jump into that, though, I do want to share a little bit about what's been going on and some of the new projects we've started and have wrapped up, because sharing fun ADU stories and videos is pretty much the thing I enjoy doing the most out of my job. So this project was such a fun project that wrapped up recently. It was an above garage ADU, 650 square feet. It's a 2-bed, 1-bath. That's a tight 2-bedroom, guys, but it is possible. And they were building this for their son, their adult son, and actually his childhood best friend. And so the 2 boys are living in this unit now, and they're both paying rent. So the parents are collecting rent on this. And I saw a funny comment on it that someone said, if I could live in a unit that nice, I would never move out. But they are paying rent. And we did a video tour of this one. So if you guys haven't checked out our YouTube channel, I love the video tour. You can kind of see everything within the unit. And we also provide a floor plan download if you watch that video. So definitely something to check out there. This one also had a washer dryer in it as well. And the cost on this one was about $250,000 all in. So just kind of gives you guys a little bit of a ballpark. This was a Southern California project. So if you're looking at doing something above the garage in the Bay Area, it's going to be more expensive than that. But if you're in kind of that Los Angeles, OC, San Diego, that's about the price point you're looking at for a project like this. The next project we just got started on is a 500 square foot, 1-bedroom, which is really going to be a great little project. And this is a young family with a young daughter. And so they're really excited to rent their unit as long-term for rental income, which is going to be great financial stability for them. And the construction started in February. So we should have some progress photos for you guys on that soon. This is another project that's already underway. Construction started earlier this month, so they're about a month in at this point, and they're planning to rent it long-term, and then eventually they want to downsize and move into that unit when they retire, and it's going to allow them to rent out the main house and really live mortgage-free, which for them is exciting. And for any of you who are familiar with kind of the San Diego area, one of them works at the Supercomputer Center at UCSD, which is pretty cool. And then here's a Bay Area project with Cecilia. I'm so excited to see this one. We are so close. In fact, we're just a couple weeks away on completion on this one. Started as a garage, and you can tell that it does not look like a garage anymore. And one of the really cool things Cecilia did here is she actually added a loft to this garage. So they removed the roof. You can actually see in that second picture there, the roof was rebuilt and much higher than the original roof. You can see there's a steeper slope there. And they put in a loft so that she's going to have this like extra space and extra storage. And she's planning to rent that long-term. So we'll make sure to get a really cool video tour for you guys, and hopefully a floor plan download as well once this unit is completed. Okay, and then one other like little quick word before we dive in. If there are any realtors or brokers on this webinar, we've started doing educational kind of workshops for brokerages. So around ADUs. So if you're, have clients that are interested in ADUs, which so many people do. In fact, we saw data that came out that there's been 20,000 ADUs built in California since 2017 with all the regulation changes. So it's really exciting, something that people are wanting to do. So if you're looking to get your realtors kind of leveled up on their ADU knowledge, we're happy to help facilitate that. And we offer those workshops for free. So feel free to reach out to us there. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. Pre-approved plans. So some of what we're going to tell you and talk about today are what does pre-approved actually mean? We're going to talk specifically about San Diego County, Los Angeles, San Jose, and some of the other cities that have already passed these pre-approved plan options. We're going to talk a little bit about construction and kind of like time savings and some of the pros and cons around pre-approved plans. We want to talk about what the feasibility of using a pre-approved plan are. They're not going to work for every site. and then talking about modifications to plans. We're also going to touch on kind of garage conversions and how they fit into that, and a little bit of best practices on kind of what we're seeing with cities. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit, and we're going to have this conversation. So Jared, maybe what we could start with is talking a little bit about what exactly does pre-approved even mean? Because I think that's something that's very confusing to homeowners. They think, okay, I'm going to pick something from this catalog of plans. I want this one. Now I go to the city. What happens there? Maybe you could walk us through it.
Yeah, so there's different kinds of programs that are set up, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But essentially what a pre-approved plan is a mostly complete set of plans. It's a set of plans that's been checked through the city for compliance with structural, some of the like worst case for Title 24 and energy compliance. And anytime you have something that's pre-approved, it's something that is, it gets you about probably 75% of the way there, but there's still reviews necessary in order to have, get your permit, start building. It's not something you can just download and hire a contractor and go start building. You still have to go through an abbreviated process at the city in order to utilize those plans. And depending on the program that's set up, it depends on whether or not you download those specifically from the jurisdiction or whether you work through the original architect that designed them. And so there's all sorts of different processes that are set up, but essentially pre means it's been checked through structural, it meets the requirements, but we still need to how it sits on.
Right. So I think maybe what we can do is even take a step back. So whether or not homeowners are looking at using a pre-approved plan or just submitting, their own custom plan, which is what the vast majority of homeowners are doing, how does that permit process work? And maybe you can talk about kind of the different departments that have to kind of stamp and approve the plans along the way, because I've seen that sometimes homeowners are a little opaque in really what that means. And I think if homeowners really understand what departments are looking at a plan, then this pre-approved thing becomes a little bit more clear to them, because they understand that it's got structural pre-approvals, not necessarily pre-approvals for everything.
Yeah. So there's typically, once you have a set of plans, it's ready to go into the city. It's typically being checked by multiple departments. There's at least a structural and a planning review, planning or zoning. Those are typically, different cities have different names for their departments. At the very, very, very least, you're at least getting checked by those two departments. And so structural is really looking at the set of plans and whether it conforms to building code, whether it, for all the fire, life safety requirements. And those are the things that are approved on these pre-approved plans. The planning or zoning side is looking at how it sits on your lot, or where it sits on your lot, whether it's in, whether you have the setbacks, whether you have, if a parking requirement applies or not. So those, at the very, very, very least, there's at least two departments. But more realistically, there's typically, 3 to 5 departments that'll be checking it as well. Down here in Southern California, we have, an engineering department that's really looking at how the water is, runoff, rainwater is treated before it gets out to the street. So we don't have, runoff going directly into storm drains, but it's actually being, filtered on site. And so like thinking about how that would apply to a pre-approved plan, it really depends on where your building is being situated, whether the water is running off onto a neighbor's property or running off onto a driveway, or, it's all hardscape. So like there's still things that need to be identified for that department. Beyond that, we have cities have historic requirements. We have other departments looking at maybe your utilities, your water meter, whether that needs to be upgraded based off of the added fixtures to that lot. And so when you really look at the part that is getting pre-approved, it's a small portion of all of the reviews that have to happen.
It's like this much, and the pie is like the whole circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it certainly does remove barriers. It certainly does simplify the process, but you also are getting a set of plans that's not designed for your lot. You're getting a set of plans that's designed for a specific scenario or a worst case scenario. And so when we talk about, whether they are feasible on an individual lot, it's really looking at, whether or not that plan that you want to use is going to be sited, placed on the property in a way that allows it to be built. So California, we have a lot of hills, we have a lot of topography on our lots, and so there's a lot of times where you may love the plan, it may be perfect for what you want to do, but it's set up to be a slab on grade, and the amount of grading necessary in order to utilize that would really negate any sort of cost savings. And really talking about like worst case scenario, and this kind of gets at some of the issues around pre-approved plans or potential cost issues. When you're designing a plan for pre-approval, you need to show that it works in as many different areas as possible. So worst case scenario being, I have the majority of my glass south facing. It's set up so that it's really inefficient from a building orientation perspective in the worst climate zone that we have in that area. And so what that means is that you're designing to that standard. So if you're orienting the building properly for, to maximize, solar heat gain and all of the kind of stuff that we look at when we're designing ADUs, the pre-approved plan is going to have higher requirements than might be necessary if it was a custom design.
Because it has to kind of meet that, greatest common denominator kind of a scenario is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And I think let's touch on Title 24 and energy requirements, because I saw, looks like we've got someone from a planning department here, and they immediately zeroed in on the Title 24 energy requirement issues. And so for those of you who don't know what a Title 24 requirement is, it's basically the energy requirements that are set by the state of California. And so the state is saying, and those get updated, annually. And the state is saying, okay, you have to be at least this much energy efficient. And the building has to meet these requirements for energy efficiency. And so when you have things like here, this is where I'm going to get back and I'm going to share some pictures with you guys. So when you have units that look like this, for example, this is a beautiful unit. It's a lot of glass. So I think when homeowners see this, they think, wow, that's, floor to ceiling windows. That looks really trendy and hip and modern. I love the natural light. And I think when Jared sees this, maybe what are your thoughts, Jared?
I mean, when I see it as, I see it as, wow, that's going to be really expensive. And the amount of like insulation, the efficiency of the glass is going to have to be so high in order for that to work in specific situations. Mm-hmm. And so, the energy requirements are not something that you just say, okay, they give you a list of, you need to have this much insulation, you need to have your, glass at this. It's really looking at the design and orientation of the building and how it's affected by its environment. So, for something like this, if all of that glass is north facing, then it might not be as expensive of a build. Again, looking at custom, it might not be as expensive of a build. But if you're looking at a pre-approved plan, it's designed for that most restrictive portion. So you really start looking at, designs that are not designed for how you want to use it. Or even if you're doing it the way that you should do it, with the glass facing the right direction, and having it, even utilizing those pre-approved plans, they still are required to use the most restrictive requirements. So,
and that can add cost. So I think that's the thing that I really want to touch on the most today, is talking about kind of the cost and time benefit. So I would say, one of the big benefits around these, using a pre-approved plan is you should be able to save time in the permit process with the city. Kind of how much time you'll be saving is dependent a bit on how the program is set up and kind of what departments have to approve the plan. And so that is going to vary depending on jurisdiction. But theoretically, you should save time in the permit process. I want to talk a little bit though about cost, because I know that something that's really a huge philosophy of the way we design projects at Maxable is that we really want to value engineer everything that we're doing, so that, and what that really means is that we want to design in a way that makes it the most cost effective to build on the construction side. So we know that, construction costs have been, rising quite dramatically. Raw material costs are up. General contractors are pretty swamped. And so obviously budgets and cost constraints are of a major concern for people. So anytime you can value engineer designs and you really make that a focus, whether you're working with Maxable on that or another architecture and design firm, there's so many great firms out there. You really want to make sure that they're looking at that component. Now, I would say that most homeowners are looking at these pre-approved plans as a way to kind of save time and money. And so that's something I really want to talk about is, from looking through the catalog, especially of these Los Angeles plans, some of these units are not designed with value engineering in mind at all. And there were some that were just like so egregious. I just have to share with you guys, because they just kind of honestly made me chuckle a little bit. So let me go back into our pictures here. So this was the one I felt like really, really.
It's interesting. It really is interesting. But cost effective, not so much. Talking about how you want to limit your glazing on a south face, you pretty much have glazing facing every direction in a lot of it. So, and it's not a knock against the design. It's a beautiful design. It just comes down to, whether it's going to be, cost effective to actually build. And sure, it's going to save, some time going through the permit process. But, the other kind of thing that we haven't really touched on as much is what can you actually change on these? Because I know that a lot of homeowners are looking for something that, whether it's a rental or whether it's a, for a family or for themselves, these are great inspiring images of designs. May look at and go, wow, that's great, but I don't have that much space on my lot. I really need something a little bit smaller. Or I would really like to have another, bathroom in this or something like that. These aren't things that can be changed.
Or, I think another example, Jared, is, for obviously something like this, you essentially have 360-degree views around the unit, but there might be, an apartment building that you want to you don't want a view of your bedroom straight into your neighbor's window. Or there might be something where you're like, well, can we not have that window there? Or like, we want to emphasize this view going forward of this, beautiful tree in the backyard, and we really want to obstruct this view over here. So what are homeowners' options on these pre-approved plans and being able to modify them?
Yeah, so in the majority of these processes, what happens is the architect or designer puts through a project they can do it with no options, or they can do it with options. When you do it with options, whether that could be a, second bathroom or making a, smaller, making a den or a bedroom out of a larger living area. Those are all things that are on the inside. And for each of those options that you put in your plan, that, takes the work approved as a pre-approved plan and skyrockets it. So from like a designer's perspective, the fewer options, the easier to actually get that plan approved. The more options, the harder it is, and the more scenarios I have to go through in order to actually show that. So
Oh, are you still there with us, Jared? Can you guys still hear me, or am I the one that's frozen? Okay, you guys can hear me. Okay, wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Wow, you guys are on it. Thank you. Okay, so Jared, I think froze, so I'll just take over kind of what he was talking about. And so, that's the issue, is that, architects are likely not going to submit a bunch of versions of their pre-approved plan. They're going to submit a version of their pre-approved plan. And that means that if you do want to make modifications to that plan, one is you likely can still work with that architect. So let's say you see that, maybe that sunburst ADU, and you think, God, this is so beautiful. I love that, but I really cannot have windows on that back half of that property. Likely you could reach out to that architecture firm and say, hey, I really like this plan. I want to make these modifications. Can I work with you on making those modifications? And that theoretically works, but you're not going to be able to submit that as a pre-approved plan. If you make one little modification, you move one window, you move one wall, you make any kind of modification like that, you're not gaining the benefits of that pre-approved plan anymore. And so, I think that where I see like the big benefits in these is if you find a plan that really works perfectly for your lot, it's the right size, it's not overly engineered, so it's not going to add a ton of cost in the construction for what you need to do. The window placements are correct for what you need, kind of those type of details. If you can find a plan that works, absolutely fan-freaking-tastic, go for it. I think though, if you're, not super excited about, or you're kind of feeling lukewarm on the design, if you think about it, your design cost is likely going to be about 3% of your overall project cost. Like the construction is really where the big bulk of the budget is going to be spent. So my kind of recommendation is really find a plan that you're excited about that really works for your specific lot, because that's not where your really big expense is coming in. So that's hopefully kind of a nice recap of that. I want to talk a little bit about garage conversions as well. So garage conversions are really, really popular projects, especially, in Los Angeles, Southern California, gosh, even in the Bay Area, we're seeing lots of garage conversions come through. That's not something that's allowed as part of the pre-approved plan process. So, and that's obviously because garages are all different. And so there's not really a standardization option there. So if you are wanting to do a garage conversion or interested in garage conversions, then that's not something that you could take advantage of as part of a pre-approved plan process. You're going to have to get kind of a bespoke design done and submit that through the regular permit process. I did see a question in here. Someone was saying, are cities meeting the 60-day permit approval turnaround? And I think that's something that let's just chat about that briefly. So unfortunately, we're seeing that not all cities are hitting that. And I think that here's another kind of misconception around like, what does the 60-day approval mean? It means that cities have to approve or deny your plans within 60 days. It doesn't mean you get a permit in 60 days. So I think with COVID, things definitely slowed down a bit for cities, and we were seeing that process kind of drag out a little bit more. In some cases, we had projects that were hitting that 60-day mark and we hadn't gotten that approval yet. And you're in kind of a tight bind because you don't really want to push super hard on the city at that point because they might just say, okay, fine, then 60 days, we're denying the permit. And then you have to start over, which we don't want. But you want to kind of just put like that steady pressure on the city of like, hey, we're hitting that 60-day mark. Can I get comments back? Is this approved at this point? So anyway, again, there's over 540 jurisdictions in California. They're all running things a little bit differently, but that is one way for you guys to think about that permit process. We have seen that things have been pushing out past those kind of 60 days. Okay, let's see. Okay, the next topic I really want to talk about are best practices for cities and different types of pre-approved plan programs. And there are cities that are doing this really, really well. Los Angeles is a great example. San Jose is a great example. San Diego County is not a great example. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences in those two programs. And I think this is something that pre-approved plans in general are going to be something that more and more cities start to roll out. So as you guys kind of keep an eye out for pre-approved plans in your neighborhoods, you can know what makes a good pre-approved plan program and what makes a bad program. So something that City of San Jose and Los Angeles really did right is they said, we're going to open up this process and be able to let any architect or design firm go through the process and submit a pre-approved plan. It goes through the master plan approval process and then becomes available, if approved, for homeowners to be able to use. And so that's a really open-ended process. It involves a lot of designers, involves a lot of architects. And the cool thing for homeowners is that it offers you guys a much, much wider range of potential plans. And so that's really exciting. And so actually at Maxable, we're submitting plans for a studio unit and a 1-bedroom unit in San Jose and in Los Angeles that are value engineered, that will fit on the vast majority of lots and will be as cost effective to build as possible. But for example, in San Diego County, we're not able to submit anything. We can't be part of that process. So what the city did there is the county did, is they said, okay, we're going to just look internally and we're going to design, 5 plans. And then those are the plans and homeowners can choose it or they cannot choose it. And that's it. It's a very closed loop process. And so the problem with that is, one, cities aren't actually looking at data around what homeowners are really wanting to build. And so, for example, not to harp on San Diego County too much, but for example, San Diego County, they did a 600 square foot studio. Well, we just showed you guys an example earlier of a client that just finished up a 650 square foot 2-bedroom. A 600 square foot studio is massive. I mean, that could easily be a really nicely sized 1-bedroom. And so it's a very strange layout to kind of choose. We also saw, I think it was maybe 1,000 square foot 1-bedroom, which could easily be two very large sized bedrooms. And so some of the ways that the county kind of went about choosing their plans and kind of putting that into place, I think likely isn't going to work for homeowners. And we were also, we're always really attuned into, again, what is the cost to build the unit that's being designed? And in some cases, the plans that were being put forth were not very cost effective to design. So I think that's just another thing you guys want to keep in mind as you're kind of looking at this process.
I'm back.
Jared, welcome back.
I switched computers, but so hopefully.
Okay, good. Well, I'm just trying to carry on the show without you. So
well, I saw you froze, and I was like, oh, I guess I better carry on. Then all of a sudden, the whole thing crashed. So, figure it was me, not you.
Yeah. So we just talked a lot about kind of best practices within cities. We touched on garage conversion.
Can we talk really quick about, did you talk about the difference between the types of programs that are out there? And all right.
Yeah, we did. We talked about kind of how San Jose and Los Angeles set up their programs and why that really should be best practices versus what was going on in San Diego County. Or for example, like Encinitas is another example. They set theirs up the kind of the same way the county did, where they just have this finite number of plans and it's kind of closed loop and there's not really participation outside.
Yeah.
So, and someone's saying kind of what's the differences between San Diego County and San Diego City? So different jurisdictions. It's totally.
It's a difference between San Diego and LA. They're two completely different jurisdictions, so they have their own rules. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm gonna share a few more things now, and then after that, we're gonna open up some time for Q&A. I want to make sure we have a lot of time to answer. You guys have had some really great questions here. So I want to make sure we get to those as well. And again, happy to answer questions that are just ADU in general. It doesn't have to be pre-approved plans. But let me get through, oops. Okay, so what you guys might find is that one, you might have a city that doesn't offer pre-approved plans. Or two, you might find that none of these plans fit your needs, or they aren't cost effective to build, or it just doesn't work for you. So kind of now what do you do? So one service that Maxable offers is the site evaluation. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about how that works. And we've had over 800 homeowners go through the site evaluation for us. So if it's something that you're considering building an ADU project and you just want a little bit more support and kind of understanding what you can do, or kind of narrowing your project scope, or talking to professionals from our design team about kind of what your thoughts and ideas are, I would really encourage you guys to take a look at that service. We've tried to price it really affordably so that, you know, we can get you that education, and it's going to be totally specific to your property. So how that process works is that you would book it online. Someone from our design team is actually going to review your property. So we do a lot of research on it. We use architectural tools and software online. Then we schedule an online client meeting where you're welcome to kind of share photos or send us videos ahead of time, talk about your goals. We discuss with you. Sometimes then we're able to do that design proposal. So we do work in-house ourselves. We have quite a lot of projects that are active right now. Or there might be another firm that we can recommend. We want to make sure that you guys are in the best hands possible. So we can kind of walk through our process and our proposal. And then if you work with us, we're your project advocate through the entire step. So we can connect you to lenders, we can connect you to general contractors, kind of any of the experts that you're going to need through this whole project. And we stay involved through the entire process. So one of the things I wanted to offer, if you guys end up booking that, wanting to do a site evaluation with us, I'm going to offer this discount on our online class as well. So we're offering a master class on how to design an ADU. And so if you end up booking that during this webinar, that is typically $150, but we'll cut that price down to just $50 when you book it with the site evaluation. So you save about $100 there. And those site evaluations are $199. Just to kind of highlight some of the things within this masterclass, this is some of the content I'm most excited that we've ever created. So we really wanted to be able to give you guys useful tools in kind of designing and planning your project. So we talk about things like where to place your ADU and how that affects costs, how to save costs on the construction phase. We give you a library of all these different small space ideas that you can actually implement for your own projects. And I love the tips from ADU landlords who have built ADUs, both long-term rentals, short-term rentals, so that you guys can kind of get some best practices from them and hear from homeowners who have done this themselves. 3 of the lessons that I really, really love is one of the lessons we give you a finished plan set with a photo tour. So you can actually see, what does a permit submit look like? What are all the pages that go into that? What does that really mean? And then we're also going to give you a photo tour of that finished unit, so you can kind of see the 2-dimensional plans paired with the final product. There's 2 video walkthroughs where we do a video walkthrough of 2 plans. One is a garage conversion, one is a standalone unit. The standalone unit is absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. I love, love, love that unit. And we give you floor plans for both of the units that you can download. So I think that's something that's really worth checking out. And then finally, we have an interview specifically on value engineering. So really looking at, how can I drive costs down on construction for my project, which is so, so critically important for making sure that you're able to, plan an ADU that's cost effective for you. So obviously there's a lot of lessons that go into this, but those are just 3 of my favorite lessons, but you guys can check out the full list of lessons that are part of that online course. And if you want to book that, you can go to maxablespace.com/bundle, and you can buy both the home eval there, or that site evaluation, as well as that discount on the online course. And again, that's going to be something that we offer during this webinar. So if you have any questions about the site evaluation or kind of how that works or what it includes, happy to answer those. But I think in the meantime, let's open it up to Q&A for whatever questions you guys have. So I see that there have been questions coming through in the kind of question and answer box as well as the chat. So Sadie, do you have some questions that you want to curate for us?
So first question, what are the biggest considerations to make when building a unit on top of an existing detached garage?
Yeah, so doing an above garage ADU is something that a lot of people are drawn to because they want to keep they want to utilize their existing garage. They don't want to give up that parking, or in most homeowners, they don't want to give up the storage. The things to think about when you're going above a garage is that you're typically going to be doing quite a bit of structural retrofit in order to support the weight of that second story. The other thing that comes up frequently when we're looking at detached garages a lot of times are on an alley where you also have power coming from the alley. And so there's considerations on utility lines and the setbacks needed from utility lines, as well as where you end up placing those stairs. Because when we have a above garage situation, you're typically, you're going to be adding a set of stairs, and a lot of cities won't allow exterior stairs in those setback areas. So you have to be creative about where your entry is going to be. And sometimes that can create a situation that is really not ideal for an above garage solution.
I think one other thing to chime in on that, Jared, is thinking about cost. Going above a garage is going to be more expensive than converting the garage. So if you're on a limited budget, a garage conversion is the most cost-effective way to get a second rentable unit on your property. Going above the garage is, more complicated for all the reasons that Jared outlined, and just generally, construction on a second story, even if it's a brand new structure versus a single story, is always going to be a little bit more expensive. So just kind of something for you guys to keep in mind there as well.
Great. What are the pros and cons of prefabs?
Prefabs. So prefab is a term that's thrown around a lot. It's much like tiny home. It can mean a lot of different things, mean different things to different people. Essentially, the generic term prefab just means that it's not built on site. It's something that's built off site. And whenever a building is built off site, it goes through a different kind of inspection process. And so they actually have inspectors that look at it in the factory to make sure that it's being built per plan, and then it gets taken out to the site and dropped on site, and then you have your site inspections as well. Prefab can be it's another way of saving time in the process. If you're selecting something off the shelf as opposed to a custom prefab, which is also something that's certain designers and manufacturers offer custom prefab. But if you're picking something off the shelf, then it's going to be something that is going to save you some time on the design side. But again, you run into kind of some of those same issues where you can't modify it. So it needs to be something that you're okay with it as it sits on the as it's designed.
Yeah. Looks like Victoria asked, does Maxable handle the hiring of contractors? So we don't handle the hiring of contractors, but we support you through the whole process of finding your contractors. So one of the things that we can offer is that we've completed a lot of ADU projects. Last year we started between us and partners 102 different ADU projects, and we have even more in the pipeline now. And so we've seen a lot of these projects complete, and we've worked with a lot of general contractors throughout the state. And so we have a network of vetted GCs that we work with, we trust, we know that they do good work, and we're happy to make introductions to those general contractors so that homeowners can kind of feel confident in that process. We can also kind of look at bids for general contractors. There's a lot of kind of ambiguity around that process. Some general contractors give bids, some general contractors give proposals. Those are different things. And so, you might get a bid from one general contractor that's a page long and says, okay, it's going to cost you about $220,000 to build this. And you might get something from someone else that's 10 pages long, line item by line item, really specking out what your allowances are, how much it's all going to cost. And it's like, how do you compare these two things? So we can help you guys kind of understand how to think about it and how to evaluate these different types of scenarios. That's part of the service that we offer through that site evaluation.
What are some high-risk considerations when converting a detached garage?
Oh, high risk. Again, it kind of goes back to the utilities. Utilities are probably the one thing that always seems to be getting in the way of a detached garage conversion. And one thing that I'll say about utilities or power lines, specifically, is that there is there's no universal standard that's being followed across the state. And what that means is that some cities are completely ignoring any type of utility issues because you have to get upgrade your meter through the utility anyways, and they'll look at that. They don't want to have crossover. And what that does is it creates situations where homeowners go through the whole process, not realizing that there's issues with utilities, only to have it pop up after they've already got a building permit and they're starting work. And then I've had utility SDG&E come out and say, oh, you can't have this here. It's like, well, there's state laws that allow me to have it. Let's work around and find a solution. But it's utilities are one of those things that from a policy perspective are in a different realm. And so, it's one of the things that at the Casita Coalition we've been talking about all year, because it's been frustrating with all the different policies throughout the state. And it really should be the same. I mean, the PUC has guidelines on how to handle these kinds of things, but not all utilities are equal.
Someone's saying that you're much louder and easier to hear than me, so I'll try to project my voice a little bit more. I think
I step back a little bit.
And I'm going to put a link in here for anyone that wants to go through the site evaluation. Just book that separately. There's a link in there, and again, we kind of help you guys through that whole process.
And one thing I wanted to just mention about the site evaluation is that, as crazy as it sounds, I personally look at every single project that comes through. So we have a lot of people that want me to look at their project specifically. Well, as you go through the site evaluation process, I am. I can't be the one that is doing the evaluation for you. We have a whole team that does that. But I am reviewing everything with our team to make sure that everything's on track. So.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Jared, and good for people to know that there are very experienced people looking at their specific property. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions around cost, and I definitely want to address some of this. So, someone said, what's the rough all-in cost for, a 500 square foot studio versus a 750 square foot one bed versus kind of a larger size? And then someone else is saying, well, what's the typical cost per square foot? And so I want to talk a little bit about costs and how we educate people on costs. So cost per square foot numbers are very, very challenging to give for a lot of reasons. One, there's so much variability between different sites and different projects and different homeowners that putting a cost per square foot number is almost impossible, especially because if you're building something smaller, like let's say you're building a 400 square foot unit, your cost per square foot are going to be so much higher than if you're building a 1200 square foot unit. And the reason that is because within ADUs, and part of the reason why cost per square foot numbers for ADUs are higher than say single family homes is because you don't have a lot of economies in scale with your project. So, you know, the first 400 square feet of a unit are always going to be the most expensive, right? You have to pour that foundation, you have to pay that designer. You know, the design fees are not that much different whether you do a 1200 square foot or a 500 square foot unit. That designer really has to do basically the same amount of work either way. And then your really expensive square footage, which is going to be kind of your kitchen and your bathroom, you can't amortize the cost of that expensive square footage with a lot of cheaper square footage, like, you know, having 5 bedrooms and a big great room and a big living room and things like that. Square footage that's generally a lot cheaper and easier for general contractors to install. So the way we like to look at kind of cost is kind of like, what is a baseline cost for different types of projects instead? Like, what's the starting cost for construction on different projects? And the other thing though too is depending on which region you're in, like Southern California prices are completely different than Bay Area prices. And obviously home values are very different there as well. And so it's all really proportional, but, you know, I would say that, you know, in Southern California, construction costs on garage conversions start at about $90,000. And in the Bay Area, those projects start at about $150,000. So, you know, that gives you guys a little bit more context on maybe how to think about cost. And I'll give one more example. There's a general contractor that I really like in Los Angeles, Sidekick Homes. Actually, they do design work as well. So if you guys are in LA, we can hook you up. Yeah, really, really great firm. And they had 2 garage conversions that were almost identical in floor plan. They were super, super, super similar. And one garage conversion ended up being $70,000 more than the other garage conversion that on paper looked, for all intents and purposes, identical. And the difference was in the homeowners. So one homeowner was planning to live in that garage conversion. So she chose much higher end finishes for herself. She wanted custom built-ins. She wanted a lot of storage. She wanted things that would really make that a home for her, versus the other one was being used as a rental. And so they didn't care as much about choosing really high end finishes and things like that. So even just variables like that are hard for us to understand and predict, like what is a homeowner going to want? And you can ballpark that about 30% of your construction costs actually come from the finishes that you end up choosing. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more.
And high-end finishes to one homeowner are not high-end finishes to another homeowner. So the finishes are really a, you know, key factor in the price, you know, overall cost of the project.
So the next question I'd love to talk about a little bit more is utilities. So someone said, is it possible to get separate utility meters for the ADU, or do they run off the main meter? And then I think I saw kind of a related question about, does the ADU have a separate address?
Yeah. So what we're finding, this is something that, because utilities are different throughout the state, but there's some kind of patterns that are emerging. They're incredibly interconnected between addresses and utilities. Most cities are requiring separate addresses. And the reason for that is around fire safety. The fire department needs to have an address to go to if it is if they're called out for a emergency, and being able to, one, have that, know that they're at the right location helps. And then the other part of that is that utilities are requiring separate meters for separate addresses. And there are some weird, situations where that is not the case. But in the vast majority of cities, if you have a separate address, you have a separate meter. And that is, it can be a very good thing because when we're talking about having a rental, having it separately metered, or even for family, utility power is typically the first portion of power that you use is cheaper than if you go over a certain threshold. So by keeping it on separate meters, you're actually getting the cheapest prices for electricity while you're using it, as opposed to combining those together and having a higher usage per month that kicks you into another tier. And as we've seen, power costs go up throughout the state, that's something that is definitely something to keep in mind. Some people are hesitant to get separate meters just because they are not, they either don't understand that portion or they think it's going to be a large added cost. It's a cost that gets recuperated as the project goes along.
Yeah, someone's saying, what is the cost to separate a meter?
It's going to be different depending on whether you have overhead, whether you have underground, whether you have, where you're pulling it to. The real, it's a, it can be anywhere from a couple $1,000s to much higher if, say, you're underground and you need to upgrade the, the connection. But it's something that is, factored in when, when you're getting a bid from a contractor as you're going through the design process. It's something that would be something that should be included in that bid.
And that brings up solar as well. And I saw a question on solar here. So just to clarify, when you need to put solar on an ADU, any new construction, detached new construction, you're having to put solar on. So
Yeah.
Exceptions there are if it's an attached ADU attached to the primary, or if you're converting a garage. Those are the two exceptions. If you're building a standalone unit in the backyard, you have to put solar on that unit.
Yeah. And obviously, if there are issues that are creating, there's the solar requirements are set up to not require more than you can fit on that roof. So, but one other thing to kind of think about with solar is that because it's looking at the size of the unit and looking at how much is needed for that size of a unit, as opposed to a standard 1,500 square foot house, the amount of solar required is typically less than the smallest system that a typical solar contractor will install. So when you are getting solar bids, they'll usually come in with a larger system than what's required, and ultimately what that does is it helps you recuperate those costs quicker. So
yeah. Someone asked about where does Maxable focus? Is it more Bay Area or Southern California in regards to kind of our network? So we operate in San Diego, all of San Diego County, in Los Angeles County, and within the Bay Area. So kind of all along Silicon Valley and East Bay as well. So if you're in any of those locations, we certainly have resources to be able to help you with a project. Kind of jumping back into solar again, talking about kind of tax credits. So that is something that homeowners can take advantage of. The tax credits have been extended on that. One kind of pro tip to think about if you're putting solar, if you're required to put on solar for an ADU, you might want to consider putting solar for the primary house as well, since you're getting that quote and getting that work done anyway. If you have an older roof on your primary house and you need to replace that roof as part of the effort to put solar on, that roof replacement can be used as part of your tax deduction. So that is all inclusive. It's not just the cost of the solar itself, it's the cost of anything that's related to that project regarding your solar. So it could be a really nice tax write-off if you're getting close to having to replace that roof anyway. That's something you can explore. If you have to upgrade your meter to put solar on, which almost all of these ADUs are requiring a meter upgrade, because if you don't have at least a 200 amp panel, then you probably don't have enough amperage to now power a whole additional unit. Again, that upgrade, which can be, anywhere from a couple $1,000s to maybe $5,000 or $6,000, that can be part of that tax deduction. So again, there's some pretty compelling reasons to try to do it this year, because those tax credits will be expiring. So again, it's all about trying to find you guys as many little deals and discounts to kind of bring those costs down on your projects. Okay, great. So let's do one more question. Let's find a really good one, Jared, if you want to find a good question for us. And then again, if we can be of assistance, we would love to book a site evaluation and help you guys with a project. There's a link to the bundle special that includes that online masterclass in addition to that site eval. We'll also put in the link just to the site eval if that's what you're interested in. But again, we've done over 800 of these evaluations now. Jared looks at all the projects, so you're really kind of getting the really expert level advice for about 200 bucks. So it's a pretty good deal.
I actually have two. One is quick for you, which is the course live in person, or is it asynchronous? And with all of us now, with kids having kids at home, I think we know what that means, but why don't you
Yeah, so the course is recorded, so you can watch it at your leisure. So we've included a bunch of PDFs and video lessons. There's slide decks, so you can kind of download things and look through it on your own time. And the course is not so time consuming that busy people can't finish it. If you sat down from start to finish and really powered through it, you could do it in a few hours. So it's not designed to be so overwhelming that you're just swimming in information.
Yeah. And lastly, I will not be testing you, so you don't need to worry about that. I only test my internal team. So that's a benefit.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Actually, there was a city planner on here that had a question at the beginning, Jared, and if he's still
I can't see it because everything before I got kicked off
okay, so
isn't there.
Said, how do departments deal with the code cycle changes for pre-approved plans and Title 24 energy?
That's a great question. So the way it works is the pre-approved plans are only good for as long as the code cycle. So once the code cycles change, which is every 3 years, they would need to be revised for that new code. Typically, there's not a lot that changes. The bigger changes are on the energy efficiency side. But from like a structural, the actual plans themselves and what needs to be updated, typically it's updating the code references, but the applicant would have to go through that process again. And this is something that's happened in other jurisdictions where they have done the less the processes that are less successful. The architects that were involved are no longer working on these types of projects, so there's no one to update them and create the new plans for the updated code cycle. So yeah.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. And if you guys need help on a project, please feel free to reach out. We want to be a resource for you guys. So have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks.